Welcome back to Politics for Smart People. Now, if you're not one of the smart people, there's an easy way to become one. Stop thinking in your emotions and start thinking in reasonable facts. Okay? So, all right, let's try to go over to the screen and let's bring up a page. All right, so this is the definition of immigration, but let's go to the 14th Amendment first. So here is what you have. The 14th Amendment. This is what the Supreme Court ruled on. Let's read it for ourselves. But before we do, let's take a look at something reasonable. If you have a law, whether it's the Constitution or some codified law, if it is written so vaguely, so ambiguously, that normal people can't understand it, but only these supreme people can understand it, that's not a very good law. Because then they can say it means anything. If you have a law that's so vague and so ambiguous that 5 judges say one thing about it and 4 say another thing about it, say the opposite, well, then there's something wrong with the law. It's not clear. Because if it's a clear law, all the judges should agree. There is that other problem with having judges that are biased, that are interpreting based on what they want rather than what the law is. That's another problem. But let's look for ourselves. Here we have the 14th Amendment Citizenship Clause. Now this has to do with the Birthright Citizenship. Section 1 guarantees that all persons born, okay, so all persons, now we're like, oh look, it's all persons. It doesn't matter who it is, it's all persons that are born, but now we're going to qualify it. Or they're naturalized. And you have to go look what that means. In the United States. Here's a key operative. It says, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Ooh. Let's find out what that means. Let's decide for ourselves what it means. Because it should be plain English. All right? It should be easy to understand. So they have to be born or naturalized, and they have to be subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, thereof, of the United States. Now ask yourself before we go on, and then it says, they are citizens of the United States. If you sneak into the country illegally and have a baby, were you subject to the jurisdiction of the United States? What does that mean to be subject to the jurisdiction of the United States? Okay. See, in my interpretation, they're not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. They're here illegally. They're not supposed to be here. The United States doesn't even know who they are when they sneak across the border. How can you be subject to the jurisdiction of the United States if you are unknown by the United States? So, subject to the jurisdiction. The jurisdiction is the United States. That's the jurisdiction. Okay? It's the United States. So you have to be a subject of the United States, like a subject of the king. If you are from another kingdom and you sneak into, if you're from Kingdom A and you sneak into Kingdom B, does that make you a citizen of Kingdom B? If you have a baby, is your baby a citizen of Kingdom B? Well, that would be if you were going to believe that, then you have to say, okay, the baby is a citizen, but the mother is not, nor is the father. So they have to go back to Kingdom A. The baby stays in Kingdom B. It's not your baby anymore. So they take it and they put it up for adoption, or they sacrifice it on the altar. Okay, so it's ridiculous to break a law, meaning sneak into the country illegally, and then invoke a law in your favor. So like you can break a law, just violate the law in order to get into the jurisdiction to invoke laws in your favor. That doesn't make any sense. No country would write a law that says if you break a law, then you get to have a law in your favor. Okay? Nobody would do that. All right. So let's read further. This guarantees automatic birthright citizenship to nearly, doesn't say all, it says nearly all individuals born on U.S. soil, regardless, now this is interesting, regardless of their parents' immigration, regardless of their parents' immigration status or legal status, regardless of their immigration status or legal status. Now, you have to go and look what immigration would mean and what legal status means. You can't just make this up in your head. You're interpreting the law. You have to do this without bias. So, if you are an immigrant, that means that you are legally coming to the country. You are migrating to this country. Sneaking into the country doesn't make you a legal immigrant, doesn't make you an immigrant. It makes you an interloper, it makes you an infiltrator, it makes you a domestic enemy. Well, actually, you're a foreign enemy sneaking into the country. Okay, it makes you a foreign enemy. But it doesn't make you an immigrant. Not in my way of thinking. Because the immigrants that came to this country in the past, that came through Lady Liberty, they were known. They were known. So they were immigrants. Okay? Just because you're sneaking across the border, does that make you an immigrant? What is the immigration status? What does status mean? So let's look at the legal status. Now, legal status would mean that they have some legal status. If you are breaking into the country, you don't have legal status. You have illegal status. You have to look at that nuance there. You have illegal status. Now, legal status can come in many forms. You could be here on a green card, visa of some sort. You could be a tourist with temporary visitation rights. You might have some legal status, a work visa. Okay, you might have some legal status, but you don't have illegal status, you have legal status. If you're sneaking into the country, you're illegal. You have no legal status. Okay? So you can't say, well, see, regardless of legal status. So even if they're illegal, it doesn't matter because it's regardless of legal status. No, you have to use lawyer speak. You have to use the language of law. For example, in courtrooms, they often will refer to false facts. And this confuses the non-legal mind. The non-legal mind will say, well, how could it be a fact if it's false? But yet the lawyers will call them false facts because they're being presented as facts, but they're false. That's how the legalese works. That's how the language of law works. So in this case, you're looking at legal status, right? Legal status, not illegal status. There's a difference. So you have to separate the two out. Illegal is not legal. And when you're talking about immigration into the country, they would be referring to legal immigration, not illegal immigration. Okay? So this is where the problem exists. This is written so that people who are not intelligent enough to interpret it properly, they miss all the nuances. Let's go back. Let's go back to what it says right here. It says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, meaning the United States. They're not subjects to the jurisdiction because they don't have legal status. They don't have legal immigration status. They don't have legal status. They have illegal status. So when you look at the basic word of immigration, this is not the legal word. This is not according to law, but this is where language gets messy if you don't use it accurately. Immigration is the international movement of people to a destination country where they are not native or citizens, with the intent to settle as permanent residences. Okay? if you are illegal, you cannot settle as a permanent residence. You see? So to say that we're going to ignore the law of the country and break into the law, break through the law, break through the country, break the law, because we intend on being permanent residences. You know you cannot be a permanent residence when you come in there. You know this. You cannot be a permanent residence if you are not legal. So you can't be a permanent residence. So you're just staying as long as you can get away with it, but you know you're not permanent because you're illegal. So this is another nuance. So the bottom line is very simple. No country, no lawmaker, nobody with a reasonable mind would say, if you can break this law, we'll let you invoke these other laws in your favor. Why would you do that? Now, imagine if they said, okay, we'll leave it like it is and we'll go ahead and see it that way. It's not really that way, but we'll go ahead and see it that way. Let's do this. You come in, you have a baby, and we'll give your baby citizenship, but you will be deported. The parents will be deported and never allowed back into the country again. The baby will get a name change and then be put up for adoption, and you will never see the baby again. How about that? Would that suit your fancy? You see? That's why nobody would write a law like that. Nobody would make a law that says you can break a law to invoke a law in your favor. Nobody would do that. If you don't understand this, it's because you're not smart. Okay, now let's go over and look at what the legal definition of immigration is. As a matter of U.S. law, a migrant is not a specific legal term. Instead, the Immigration and Nationality Act, the INA, classifies individuals who are not U.S. citizens as aliens or non-citizens, categorizing them legally based on their purpose and authorization for entry. So there it is right there. Authorization for entry. There it is right there. You see that? These people that are doing this baby anchoring thing, they are not here with authorization. So therefore they are not legal immigrants. Got it? Are you having trouble with this? Because if you are, you're not smart. Now let's continue on. Okay, so immigrants. Legally defined in 8 U.S.C., that's the codified law of the United States. Section 1101, subsection A, 15. So there's probably a lot to read in there. As every alien except those legally defined as every alien except those explicitly classified as non-immigrants. This primarily refers to individuals who are granted lawful permanent residence status. That's what an immigrant is. Someone with lawful permanent residence. If you don't have lawful permanent residence, you are not an immigrant. See that? So regardless of immigration status means legal immigration status. If you don't have legal immigration status, then you don't qualify for anchor baby. Okay? And you have to be subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. If you are illegally here, you are not subject to the jurisdiction of here. You are subject to the jurisdiction of somewhere else. The United States does not tax you if you're illegal, right? They do not grant you right to an attorney to defend you for crimes and things like that. No, you're illegal. Get out. Okay? See, and what it says by permanent residence status, lawful permanent residence, LPR, allowing them to live and work permanently in the U.S. and eventually seek naturalization. Eventually they can become citizens. Now let's look what a non-immigrant is. There are foreign nationals granted lawful admission to the United States for a specific temporary period and purpose. See, this would be legal status but you're not an immigrant. See, an immigrant would have to be legally an immigrant, or if you're not an immigrant, you have to have legal status. But you cannot have illegal status in any form. So to give someone anchor baby rights when they don't have legal status or legal immigration, they don't qualify. And this is the problem. You have a Supreme Court where 5 people are incapable of interpreting this properly. You have to wonder if they even tried. You have to wonder, are they stupid or are they biased? Because they were all liberals, except for, I guess, some of them were on the Republican side. Maybe they're pretending to be conservatives and they're not. Maybe they're infiltrating. You have to wonder why they couldn't get this right, because this is clear language to any reasonable person that's intelligent. Okay? If you're not intelligent, you can't understand this. So it says that these are foreign nationals granted lawful admission to the United States for a specific temporary period and purpose. Common examples include tourists. See, this is the problem now. We have these tourist Chinese who come in and then have their babies and say, our babies are citizens. No, they're not citizens if you came in here and stayed here for 8 months for the purpose of making this happen. Because what you're trying to do is infiltrate the country. You're trying to commit acts, enemy acts, right? You're trying to create enemy acts against the United States. So this is a problem, okay? Because when this stuff was written, people they didn't have big, they weren't coming in on ships by the droves. They weren't coming in on airplanes, right? They weren't sneaking in on private vessels. That wasn't happening when this was written. So now we have the enemy sending people in to have their babies to get this citizen status. Okay, so to include tourists, I would say no. I would get rid of the tourist aspect of it. How about students on F1 visas? I would say depending on where they're from. Like, you don't want to keep all the Chinese people out, because some good Chinese people might actually want to live here and be Americans and not be connected to China. Just like we have Iranians that want to come here and not be connected to Iran anymore. Not in that way. They don't want to be subject to the jurisdiction of a criminal regime. Okay? So you have all these new associations and problems that need to be dealt with from a point of view of the law. But one thing we know for sure, sneaking into the country and having a baby is not legal status. So your baby is not really a citizen. So there's a lot of people in this country that are not actually citizens, even though they've been given citizenship. It was done incorrectly. But as far as these tourists from China, I would consider that under the Emergency War Powers Act. That's a very dangerous avenue, because they're coming here legally, but they're doing it only for the purpose of having the baby, to get the baby citizenship. So you need to change it so that if they get citizenship here, they cannot have citizenship in China. But if they come here and are born, like if they're born here, they have to stay here. You can't have the baby and then go back to China, right? So that's what you should do with it. Say, no, if you have the baby and go back to China, no, the baby is not a citizen. The baby has to stay here. So that means that the parents would have to have the intent of immigrating here. And they'd have to state that up front in the beginning when they got here, not 8 months later after they have the baby, right? So you say, well, if you come here pregnant and you don't tell us that you're pregnant and you don't have the intention of staying here as an immigrant, so that means you have to apply for immigration status, and you have to be granted immigration status, which means you have to be vetted, okay? So that would make things a lot different. That would make things different, because you'd have to be more than just a tourist. You'd have to be willing to give up your life in China, okay? And you couldn't just stay here for a year. you would have to have permanent residence, say, for at least, say, 10 years. Okay? If you stay here for 10 years and your baby is 10 years old, make it so that the baby is an adult. So 18 years. So once you have the baby, you have to stay here for 18 years. So the baby is raised as an American, not as a Chinaman. Okay? Not as a Chinese. All right. That's just me making up. How would I formulate the law? I would do things way worse than that. But I'm just saying, I'm just trying to be reasonable. So then they have asylees and refugees. Now, a lot of people try to get in under this. They just say, yeah, I'm running from danger. And maybe they're really not running from danger. And those are usually temporary status. So individuals who cannot return to their home countries because of persecution or a well-founded fear of persecution based on race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular group, a social group. So you get into all that. So how do we get 80,000 Somalis over here? 80,000 Somalians came over here to do what? To vote as one. See, they vote as one. They vote as a group. So they are a clan, and they vote as a group to whatever would get them the benefits from the United States. So they don't have to work. They could just suck money off the United States, get all these billions of free dollars that they siphon off and send it to their terrorist organizations. All those people should go back. They should all just go back to their country, and if they have a problem with terrorism in their country, just invite the United States to solve that problem for them. Look what we did for Venezuela. First, we got rid of their evil regime, and now they had a massive earthquake, and we went over there to help them rebuild from the earthquake. So they're benefiting from the United States without ever having to leave their country. Why not do the same thing for the Somalis? They have a beautiful country. Send them all back, then go over there and wipe out their evil regimes that are the terrorist organizations around Somalia, and then give them back their country, and then help them build up a wonderful country. Okay, don't allow them here to parasite off of America. I mean, it used to be Lady Liberty was like this and proud, and the immigrants would come in. Now she's been over on her knees with her hands down, and that's how they're coming into the country now. They're raping Lady Liberty. Okay, so that should give you enough to think differently about this situation. But it also is enough to let you know that those people on the Supreme Court, they're either stupid or they're biased. One or the other, or both. Stay tuned, I'll keep you posted.